Have you ever stood at the edge of your own collapse when everything that gave you stability, your work, your identity, your certainty, simply dissolved beneath you? The ground vanishes. The life you thought was yours becomes something unrecognizable. In that silence between what was and what remains, the question that rises is simple and terrifying. What now? 400 years ago, a 17-year-old boy named Miyamoto Musashi found himself asking that very question. Once a rising samurai from a proud clan, he awoke one morning in October 1600 to discover that everything he knew was gone. The Battle of Sekigahara, the greatest conflict in Japanese history, had reduced the world to chaos. In 6 hours, more than 150,000 men clashed in a storm of steel and death. When the smoke cleared, Musashi's clan lay in ruins. His comrades were slaughtered. His honor turned to ash. The code that had raised him to die with dignity demanded his life, but he did not die. He fled. To live, in that moment, was not triumph. It was humiliation. He became a ronin, a masterless warrior, stripped of name and belonging, wandering the forests and mountains of Japan with nothing but a blade and silence. The boy who had been a soldier was now a ghost. Most men would have ended their story there. Musashi began his. In exile, he discovered that when life burns everything you depend on, it leaves you naked before truth. There is nothing left to protect you from reality. No illusion, no excuse. And in that raw space, he found the first discipline of transformation: acceptance. He stopped asking why and started asking what now. It was a simple shift, but it changed everything. When you stop fighting what already happened, all the energy wasted on resistance becomes available for creation. Think of a house on fire. You can curse the flames or you can search for the door. One keeps you trapped, the other saves you. Acceptance, he realized, is not surrender. It is clarity. Modern psychology now calls it cognitive reframing, but Musashi understood it through instinct. He saw that those who cling to what was die with it. Those who accept what is begin to live again. Acceptance turned his grief into focus. Focus became motion. Motion became purpose. And then came the second trial: comfort. When pain is deep, the world whispers seduction. Drink, distraction, indulgence, anything to forget. Many fallen samurai turned to wine, gambling, or mercenary violence to quiet the ache. But Musashi chose the harder road. He refused to escape. He chose discipline instead of relief. He lived like a monk of the sword. He slept outdoors, ate only what was necessary, trained for 8 hours a day. When his body ached, he continued. When loneliness pressed in, he turned to silence instead of noise. He discovered that suffering chosen with intention refines the soul, while pleasure chosen to avoid suffering weakens it. Every small act of discipline, waking before dawn, cleaning his blade, training without complaint, became an act of defiance. He was telling life, "You can take everything, but you cannot take my will." Years later, neuroscience would confirm what Musashi lived. Discipline builds neural strength while escapism corrodes it. He did not have laboratories or studies. He had forests, hunger, and silence. That was enough. Over time, his pain began to change shape. It became a teacher. It taught him that pain resisted is torture. Pain accepted is transformation. He no longer asked for life to be easier. He asked only to be stronger. Years passed, and the Ronin grew into a shadow of legend. By the time he was 29, his name whispered across Japan. But the duel that sealed his myth took place on a small island off the coast, Ganryu Island, where he faced Sasaki Kojiro, the demon of the longsword. Kojiro was the perfect warrior, elegant, skilled, proud. He carried a blade longer than any in Japan, and a reputation to match. When Musashi accepted his challenge, the entire country held its breath. The duel would decide more than victory. It would define what mastery truly meant. Musashi arrived 3 hours late, not out of arrogance but design. While Kojiro fumed and cursed, Musashi carved a wooden sword from an oar as his boat drifted toward the island. When he finally stepped onto the sand, the crowd jeered. Kojiro's fury erupted, but Musashi's gaze remained calm, his breathing slow, his stance grounded in stillness. Kojiro struck first, rage bursting through the wind. Musashi moved once, a single counter, clean and final. Silence followed. Kojiro fell. It was not speed that won that day. It was serenity. Kojiro fought with emotion. Musashi fought with presence. That duel became his revelation. Emotion is the enemy of mastery. From that moment, he trained his mind as relentlessly as his sword. He learned to observe feeling without obeying it, what he called the imperturbable mind. A warrior, he realized, must feel deeply, but act calmly. Centuries later, science would confirm his discovery. The human brain under emotional surge, anger, fear, excitement, loses judgment. Most regretted decisions are born in that haze. Musashi's solution was simple. Breathe. Wait. Let the wave pass. When emotion roars, pause. 10 breaths. Clarity returns. True mastery is not the absence of emotion. It is freedom within emotion, the ability to act with intention while the storm still rages. But even mastery carries danger. In solitude, with fame surrounding his name, Musashi faced a subtler enemy, the weight of his own mind. Victory brought silence, and in that silence, old memories returned. He began to relive Sekigahara again and again, the deaths, the humiliation, the loss. His mind became a battlefield that never ended. He realized that even an undefeated man can be conquered by thought. So he did what few warriors ever dared. He changed the nature of his battle. Instead of fighting enemies, he began to study existence itself. He learned calligraphy, sculpture, and architecture. He painted landscapes and studied poetry. He walked mountains, observed rivers, listened to wind moving through bamboo. He sought teachers of art, monks of Zen, builders of temples. He expanded his mind beyond combat, and through that expansion he found harmony. He saw that a mind obsessed with itself shrinks, but a mind engaged with the world expands. The same discipline that once shaped his sword now shaped his attention. He began to see patterns in all things, in brushstrokes, in bridges, in waves, in silence. The art of battle became the art of life. Modern neuroscience would later find that learning new patterns literally rewires the brain. Musashi discovered this centuries earlier through experience. When the mind meets novelty, it breaks the cycle of pain. When it expands outward, sorrow fades. Through knowledge, he freed himself from rumination. Through art, he dissolved his grief. Through observation, he rediscovered joy. But even wisdom must face its final test. In his later years, as his name became immortal, Musashi encountered one last shadow: envy. He looked upon other warriors who still had their clans, their recognition, their comfort, and for a time, bitterness took root. Why them? Why not me? The question poisoned his peace. Then he saw what was happening. He understood that comparison is the most silent form of self-destruction. So he trained his mind again, this time in gratitude. Not shallow optimism, but deliberate awareness of what remained. Each night before he slept, he named 3 things he was thankful for, not vague platitudes, but specifics. I survived today's training. I learned a new movement. I saw beauty in the clouds above the temple. He discovered that gratitude was a weapon sharper than any sword. When he focused on what he had, fear dissolved. Gratitude rewired his mind toward calm abundance. Science would later prove this. Gratitude increases serotonin, reduces fear, strengthens logic. But Musashi lived it long before anyone could measure it. He realized that a grateful warrior enters battle already whole. He does not fight to prove worth, but to express it. Envy creates scarcity. Gratitude creates strength. Envy makes the heart frantic, gratitude makes it still. And from that stillness, Musashi reached his final truth, the one that made him more than human. He understood that the goal of rebuilding life is not to return to who you were. It is to become someone new. The boy who lost everything at Sekigahara never returned. He died on that field. But from his ashes rose the philosopher-warrior who wrote the Book of Five Rings. He never tried to reclaim the past. He created a new self entirely, a being forged by loss, tempered by discipline, and guided by wisdom. If Sekigahara had not destroyed him, he would have remained ordinary. It was destruction that made him extraordinary. The collapse was not the end. It was the beginning. And maybe that is the hidden law of life. When everything falls apart, it is not punishment. It is invitation. The fire that burns you is the same fire that forges you. Pain is the doorway through which strength enters. You may not see it now, but the version of you that survives this storm will look back and understand. The end was the beginning. So stop trying to rebuild what was lost. Begin instead to shape what can be. Let discipline replace despair. Let perspective replace pain. Let gratitude replace envy. You were not meant to return unchanged. You were meant to emerge remade. Because life, like the sword, is only sharpened through pressure. The warrior does not pray for easier battles. He trains for greater strength. You are not broken. You are being refined. Your ruin is your forge. Your pain is your teacher. Your path begins here. Train your mind. Master yourself. Walk the dojo path.